we are going to be getting started pretty soon. And as people begin to show up, let us know if the audio, if the video is doing well for you, if you're having any sort of AV issues. There's a lot going on always in the association community, but what I do want to make sure of is that anybody who's participating this week, anybody who is planning on engaging, that you can hear us and see us. So let me know if you can type into the chat box. We have a couple people, a few people added on here, but nobody chatting yet. It is just 2:01. I guess I shouldn't be too hard on him, huh, Jeff?
I guess not.
And while we are giving it one more minute for people to show up, if you want to get a tasty beverage, I have my coffee here. A little product placement there, association chat.
Nice.
If you want to get a tasty beverage, or if you would like to tweet out or share with your friends, your colleagues that we are going to have a phenomenal association chat today, then please do so. We'll give it one more minute. Oh my goodness. So much happening. And I have vacation coming up. I am very, very excited, to tell you the truth. All right, it's officially 2:02, so I want to go ahead and get started, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Association Chat, which is your weekly online discussion for the association community, where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm your host, KiKi L'Italien, CEO of Amplified Growth Digital Marketing and host of this weekly chat that's been around since 2009. No small thanks to Jeff DeCania right over here, actually. This week's show, let's talk about what we're talking about this week. This week, we have the director experience, designing a stronger board through foresight. Now, many of you may, if you are members of ASAE, the American Society of Association Executives, you may have seen this come through. It's the board brief that came through this week for me. And Jeff actually has a nice article in this one. It's perfect timing for a lot that's happening right now. Listen, associations are always focused on becoming stronger and better. They're seeking improvement constantly, and that can be a very good thing, as long as you know how to get there. So how does one do that with the least possible risk of mishap occurring? How can you use the power of foresight correctly and effectively, or at all? One must know how to tell what trends are around the corner, which ones to adopt, and which ones will be the next fads to die out faster than Pokemon Go. If not, you could make the mistake that will take you backwards instead of forwards, and no one wants that. So foresight is the key to designing a stronger board, one that you'll be proud of. With that said, and without further ado, let me introduce you to our guest, Jeff DeCania, who's the executive advisor for Foresight First, the perfect guest to have on for this chat, and a good friend of mine. And here's a little bit more about Jeff. I'm going to do the spiel, Jeff, and then I have our first question for you.
Sure.
Jeff is an author, speaker, and advisor for associations and nonprofit organizations across North America and around the world. He's a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and a fellow of ASAE. He served on the ASAE board of directors from 2007 to 2010, and he serves as the immediate past chair of ASAE's Key Consultants Committee as a member of the ASAE 2020 Centennial Task Force. So thanks for joining us today. Jeff, thank you for being here.
Thank you, KiKi. It's great to be back on Association Chat.
Yay, I know, and Association Chat loves having you here. All right, so first things first, anybody who's been paying attention to you, your story, your brand, your company, we've seen you very active, high profile in the community, definitely a thought leader in the industry for years, and there have been some pretty big changes that you've gone through recently. Mm-hmm. Foresight First is more than just a new name for your company, isn't it? Why did you decide to rebrand your business after all this time?
Well, I think, there's personal reasons, and then there's also professional reasons. And the personal reason is I celebrated 15 years of Principal Innovation on February 1st, so last week. And for the last 2 years, I've really been having a conversation with myself, asking the question, what do I want the next 15 years to be like? Knowing that this milestone was on the horizon, I really wanted to say, okay, the next 15 years need to be different. I wanted to have a different focus and kind of a different emphasis to the work, while still preserving my typical connections to associations and the work that I've, some aspects of what I've done already. So for the last couple of years, I've been having this conversation, and I decided within the last year that I was going to make a break with the past by rebranding, coming up, having a new name, really make it different in that way. And that's what I did, and it really crystallized for me at the beginning of this year when I wrote an article for Associations Now, and that was titled Foresight First, and that really crystallized it for me to say that's the direction, that's the name I want to use, the brand I want to use, and I built it around that. So that's sort of the personal reason, but the professional reasons are more important, because what I really wanted to do with Foresight First was emphasize work with boards of directors, association, nonprofit boards of directors, because what I've seen over the course of the last 15 years, and even before that, before I was a consultant, is boards of directors that they're very focused on, in some cases, they're very focused on what has been, they're very focused on the past, and focused on the present, but they really are not providing effective stewardship for the future. And in the last 15 years, things have become, the stakes are so much higher now for every organization, for every profession, industry, and field, that we really need boards to focus their attention on where we're going. And so what I'm hoping to be able to do here is really help to work with boards to design the future of governing in a way that really enables them to focus their attention on preparing their associations, their stakeholders, and the fields that they serve for whatever comes next.
I mean, having talked with you in the past about this topic, and then being very familiar with principled innovation, now Foresight First, it's an exciting time for me to see what you're going through as far as welcoming this new focus, right? But are there any, before we get to talking about the real fun, for me, the fun stuff, getting into exactly what Foresight First is all about, and the director experience, what tips do you have for others that are thinking about going through the rebranding process? Because I mean, there are people who tune in who own their own businesses or go into consulting for themselves, and I don't know, that's a pretty, even if you're an association executive that's looking at rebranding, it's a pretty big thing to take, a pretty big task to undertake. So I don't know, any advice, or what's been your experience so far?
Well, I mean, I think I have to say it's been a surprisingly emotional, process, because I've been thinking about it for so long, and kind of mapping out what I wanted to do, that it really has only hit me in the last week or so, the last 10 days, the emotional nature of this. I was recently having a conversation with my web designer, and she and I have been through 2 iterations of the Principal Innovation site before this, and then we've been working on the Foresight First site. And it's ironic that it was actually, I think, 2 years ago yesterday that I posted something on Facebook to announce the launch of the most recent Principal Innovation site. So here we are 2 years later.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I think, and she said, I said, can we take down the Principal Innovation site, and we'll take it down and we'll back it up, and we can cancel the hosting and everything like that. And this is all very inside baseball. But I said, let me know when you've got it all backed up, because this is kind of an emotional thing for me. And she's like, it's kind of emotional for me too. Wow. So it's an emotional process. And so I guess in terms of your question, I guess the advice that I would offer is, um, don't ignore the emotional side of that, right? Like if you want to, I think everyone sort of charts the course through anything like this in a fairly straightforward intellectual way.
Hmm.
But you also have to acknowledge the fact that at some point, especially if it's your thing, especially if you're a solo consultant or it's your firm, whatever, that there is going to be an emotional impact on you at some point,
Right.
and you need to be ready for that. And depending on who you are, that emotional impact may be more significant, than or less significant. Just depends on what your makeup is. But that's something I think we all have to grapple with.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely, I don't know, I guess sympathize. I haven't gone through as big of a rebrand as you have. So I can't say that I empathize, but I can just imagine that it's huge and hugely emotional because that's you wrapped up into that brand.
Right.
Let me see if I can bring over your website quickly, and let me see if I have it here. I do. Look at
Yeah.
that.
It's
Okay.
foresightfirst.io.
All right. So I have this over on. Let me see if I can get this on your, because I looked at it earlier and I thought it looked fantastic, just absolutely gorgeous.
Well, I'll give a shout out to my friend and colleague Jessica Lopez and her company Digital by Jess.
Yeah.
She has been my web designer now for two PI sites, as I mentioned, Foresight First, plus another site that we created a couple of years ago that is we actually used to create this one. So we've been working together for a while now, and she's terrific. And she's not only an outstanding web designer, works with WordPress quite a bit, but someone who I've come to really trust as a business advisor, because she is also a solo practitioner like I am, and so we talk a lot about things that go beyond website design and technology. We talk about, I get her opinion on a lot of things, and she's been very helpful to me in that regard. So she's great, and she's in the about Foresight First section of the site. She's one of the partners listed if people are interested in reaching out to her.
Oh, wow. Great. Okay. Well, we know how to reach out to her then. And this is awesome. I love it. And I love that that worked, by the way. Always like it when technology. I did lose you. It actually came up. Perfect.
Well, and I'm glad the site was functioning too. So that's good. That worked for me too. I was glad to see it come up there. Like, oh god,
like crossing your fingers. Oh my gosh.
Let's make sure we don't have a problem with the DNS. So
yeah.
Thank goodness.
Well, okay. So let's talk a little bit about this director experience. I mean, people are maybe familiar with UX, the user experience, but you're talking about something called the director experience. So can you tell us a little bit more about the director experience and why it matters?
Well, so just before I want to get to just before I get to that, I just want to say a word about Foresight First as something more than a brand,
Okay.
because I think that'll help. I think that as we sort of alluded to earlier, it's more than just a name. It is a mindset that I think we have to have boards adopt. And the mindset is that in the same way that we are talking more and more these days about mobile first, right? Everyone's talking about we've got to be mobile first. Well, what is really mobile first? Mobile first is a recognition that more and more of the stakeholders that companies, associations, any kind of organization is trying to interact with, that the interaction with them is occurring on a mobile device primarily in most cases, right? Even less so on laptops, to some extent on tablets, but it's mostly a mobile experience. And so that implies that the organization needs to craft its technology in a way that fits with that environment. And so that same premise on some level, on a very basic level, is embedded in this, is that the nature of the challenges facing associations and nonprofit organizations is such that what we really need boards to be focusing on first is the work of foresight, and that there are other things that boards can do and need to do and have to have a role in, but that we can find other ways to address those issues. So, like, as I said before, when we talk about redesigning the future of governing, I really mean upending all of the assumptions we've been making for decades about what it means to govern, what governing looks like, and the way we structure governing, the way we design governing, that we really have to examine very carefully those assumptions and challenge them so that we can position the work of foresight as being the centerpiece of what boards are doing, because their boards really are the only group in our organizations that have the combination of responsibility, opportunity, and authority to work in this area. They've got specific responsibilities that come with the role of serving on a board. They've got opportunities to do this because they gather, frequently, 2, 3, 4 times a year or more, and they have the authority to make decisions on behalf of the organization. So we really need to shift our focus toward that approach, and so foresight first becomes not just an interesting way of naming a company. It actually is a mindset and a approach and a set of beliefs that are intended to drive the way we think about governing going forward. So I just wanted to sort of lay that out there as a sort of an element of the conversation around the director experience.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that I love the concept of approaching the duties that board members have and saying, in addition to these traditional duties that that you have, which, I mean, the thing that always comes to my mind whenever we have this conversation, though, or whenever we're talking specifically, you and me, is I always think of how hard it is to get the board to even take up the responsibilities that they already have. And a lot of the complication that can come, not to say all boards are like that, but I'm just saying that, back in my association days, when we would prepare for the board to come in, a lot of times we were lucky if they read stuff on the plane on the way in, and a lot of people sitting around the table, there might be a couple truly, really, really super engaged, and others kind of, filling the seat for a while until it got in an area that they were particularly interested in. And so I think that that's why I look at what you are proposing as both challenging and also as what's needed, because I see that it's not enough to just do the minimum that's expected. It's you're asking them to take on more. And that's not just on the board side, but also the staff side. So, could we talk a little bit more about what you see as being the director experience and, walk us through that? Because I like the idea. I'm going to admit to my ignorance now. Is DX already a thing, or did you create that? Because that's kind of cool.
Let's talk about some of the things you just said and wrap it into the idea of the director experience.
I said a lot, so let's do it.
and I think with the poll question that we have being put up for this, I think it's a good thing for people to take a look at and respond to, because you've pointed out some of the issues that boards have, right? So there's a full range of issues, right? Sometimes the challenge that boards have or that associations have is in identifying the right people to serve. They can't attract the best talent. They may not be able to find the right people. They may not be able to bring enough diversity to their boards.
Right.
There can be boards, there are boards where, as you pointed out, there's a lack of preparation ahead of time, lack of participation, a willingness on the part of directors to sort of give away their responsibility to executive committees, for example, allowing executive committees to take the lead, and then they sort of rubber stamp what the executive committee says. You will have micromanagement in boards, or focus on operations, which is not what you want. You will see no real interest in improving performance on the part of the board, or you'll see complacency. Everything is going fine, so why do we have to do things differently? Or they're stuck in the past. We have to do things the way we've always done. These are challenges that I hear consistently, and I've heard consistently over the course of not just my consulting career, but my association career about boards. And really, if you think about it, it all comes back to this idea that I'm talking about now called the director experience, right? And you're right. You said earlier that, we talk a lot about user experience, right? Certainly when we're online, there's a whole conversation around UX that goes on when you're interfacing. Mobile first is a UX conversation, right? And there's a customer experience issue now, and everyone's talking about how important it is for us to create experiences in every aspect of our organizations, right? There's a member experience discussion that goes on, a customer experience, a user experience. There's an employee experience.
We've got experience design that's happening for events.
I was on Twitter recently, and I saw something on Twitter about the physician experience as well, right?
Wow,
so the bottom line is everyone is saying, everyone is writing about the importance of experiences versus products and services, and we need to create experiences for those we're serving. And so the question that just popped into my head is, why are we not talking about the director experience, right? Mm-hmm. If, in fact, we recognize that there are all these issues in the way boards function, if, in fact, we recognize that the stakes are so much higher today for our organizations than they were 15 years ago, right, or even 5 years ago, and we recognize that we want to help our boards be more successful because their success means the success of the organization, in all likelihood, in the stakeholders of the organization, and perhaps even the field itself. So why are we not talking about the director experience? And so that is going to be a huge aspect of my conversation with associations, is that we really need to start asking the question, what is the experience that we are offering to directors today? And is that experience something that the very best people in the association would want to have and participate in? And how can we make that experience so compelling, so significant, right? So valuable to them that we don't have problems of preparation or participation or complacency or micromanagement or any of the other things that we have going on right now. I mean, it seems like we continue to perpetuate a system that enables these problems instead of taking a step back and saying, how can we actually solve these problems by questioning our assumptions about what the work of governing is supposed to be and what the experience is supposed to be for the stakeholders who participate in this way, who take on roles serving on boards of directors. So for me, it's a no-brainer that we should be having this conversation because it's crucial. And yes, I don't know if I'm comfortable. I never like to make it about me, but I don't know that anyone else is talking about director experience in quite this way. So so DX, I suppose, is something that I love it.
I think that should be a book. I think it'd be really cool.
Well, I think it will come to be something like that, because really it's, you said before we're asking them to take on more, and I actually would challenge that to say it's not about asking them to take on more. It's actually about taking away some things through other means. It's actually them to take on different, right? That's the issue. What we have to do is have them take on different and refocus their attention on what is most important and away from things that we can find other ways to address.
So just a couple quick things. First of all, if you are watching this live and not listening to it later, but you're here and you're at a place where you're able to type into the chat box and ask your questions, interact with us, ask Jeff questions, or take the poll. Now listen, we have a poll that's here that is asking, what is the most significant problem associations have with their boards? And there are a number of different answers. We have 5 options for you to choose from. And if you could take just a moment to answer your answer to that poll, it'd be fantastic, because we're really curious about it. And I think it might inform us on future conversations. We did have one comment come in from Amanda, and she writes, in a leadership study I recently conducted, I heard that some boards have a hard time attracting the best people to serve, and poor performing boards focus on operations, not strategy, just like the questions in the poll. Yay, see, we go. That's how great this poll is. Also in the research, board members worry about risk. They worry about sinking the ship or making a big mistake on their watch. So fascinating stuff from Amanda. What do you have to say about that, Jeff?
Well, I think Amanda's confirming, the current state for a lot of associations, and I can't say that every association is accurately described by what I said or by her comment,
Mm-hmm.
but I think this condition exists fairly broadly across associations and nonprofit organizations. And so, again, I would go back to what I said before, which is why are we continuing to enable a system that produces these kinds of outcomes, right? Instead of fundamentally rethinking the approach that we could take, right? And that's why I, in choosing to go down this direction of foresight first, I'm making a statement, or I hope I'm making a statement. I'm intending to make a statement, maybe more accurate. I'm intending to make a statement that what we have to do is we have to tie together the idea of board performance with the board's focus on the future, right? The other activities of boards, right? The other activity, because really, I mean, what are the activities we need boards to perform? There's an awful lot of stuff that we add to the board responsibilities, right? Mm-hmm. Things that, quite honestly, they really don't need to be doing, right?
Right.
And so what we really need to do is focus on the most important things for boards to devote their attention to. And that is, how do we manage issues of risk, right? And how do we ensure, and that's comprehensive, right? That's financial risk, that is operational risk, that is security, cybersecurity and other risk, privacy risk, reputational, mm-hmm. and so on. So there's a variety of risks, some of which are financial in nature specifically, some of which have financial implications but are a little different from straight up financial issues. So we have to build capacity for managing risk inside our organizations. And that's a big area, but we can also do a better job of that by applying more technology, to the work of governing. One of the things that, I have an article coming out in CalSA's magazine in a month and a half or so, in which I write about some of the other things we have to do. And Foresight First is a mindset, it's a governing orientation. Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, we also have to focus on what I described in that article as augmented stewardship, right? Which mm-hmm. is, we have the boards of directors that are stewards, and as stewards, they have responsibilities, but we can augment their capabilities by using technology, right? And that technology can reduce, if not altogether remove, some of the cognitive burdens that boards are asked to carry, especially when it comes to financial issues. Like, why would we ask directors who have no experience with financial statements to review financial statements and try to learn what they mean, when we can be using technology to evaluate financial statements and say, are there red flags here, right? Right. That is not a huge technical challenge to be able to address. It doesn't take them out of the loop. It simply means that they are not going to be sitting there poring over Excel spreadsheets when right. they can be getting advice from advisors, and they could be getting input from technology that enables them to make better decisions, so they can devote more of their attention to more important things.
You're saying you are using these resources, you're using these people who come with their own knowledge about that industry that's very unique and very valuable, and saying, let's not have them doing something that can be done by other people. Let's take this unique opportunity to then put them to work on the things that matter the most for the mission of our organization. And so what I like that you said earlier is, but I also think is, again, and this is the thing with you, Jeff, that I love, is that a lot of what you suggest is challenging to people because it is not going in the direction of the way that things have always been done. And so, I think you would probably say that, maybe Foresight First is not that big of a leap, but I think the simple act of challenging assumptions is a really big leap for some people, right? And so challenging their assumptions about how a board acts or what it does, that in and of itself can be a challenge for some. Not all, but for some.
Well, I mean, I think that's true. And I've been talking about orthodox beliefs in associations for a long time.
Yeah.
And I've written about it and I've spoken about it. And there's a tremendous amount of orthodoxy embedded in the way we think about governing and what boards are supposed to do, how they function, how we organize them. I was recently looking at but let me just preface what I was going to say with this, that at the same time that we have those orthodox beliefs, we have this imperative now to focus the attention of our organizations on what's coming at us, right? Mm-hmm. That has never been more important than it is right now, because we are I think, very much on the precipice of an even greater acceleration into the future with all the developments that are occurring across all the dimensions that we all know about. There's so much discussion today about how much more intelligent artificial intelligence is getting. There's so much,
right.
There's so much focus about how much automation is affecting things, and some of it is hype, some of it is crying wolf, but some of it is very real, right? And someone in our organizations has to take responsibility for understanding the implications of these issues rather than dancing around the margins and hoping that everything will be okay. Okay, right. So having said that, I was recently looking at a list of, and I won't name names. I'll just simply say that I was looking at a list of what were described as, necessary. I don't even remember exactly the terminology, but necessary practices of governance for nonprofit organizations. Right? It was a summary and they sort of broke it down into, these are the things that are really leading edge, and these are the things that are good, and these are the things that are compliance related, and so on. And it was a PDF, and I was reading through it, and nothing I hadn't already seen before, nothing I hadn't experienced from my time serving on boards or working with boards, things that most people who work in associations would recognize. But I did a search within the document for the word future, and it appeared twice.
Wow.
In the entire document. Twice.
Wow.
The word future appeared in the document, right? Now, I got to tell you, I found that troubling.
Yeah.
Because I get what the organization or the people who prepared this document were after. I get it. And I get what they were trying to do. But I got to say that it concerns me that if the way we're describing governance practices has so little connection to the future of our organizations, and many of the things that they describe in there are things that really should not be that difficult for an organization to implement, pretty quickly. And these are not things that we should be spending too much time saying, okay, these are the great practices of governing, when in fact we've got much more serious challenges for a lot of organizations on the horizon. And it's entirely possible that for some of the organizations out there, and I don't mean to sort of give, drop into my Grim Reaper act here, but it's entirely possible that no amount of redesigning the work of governing will help some organizations. That's entirely possible. The factors that exist in the environment may be too great, like it may already be playing out in a way that's not favorable to them. There's no way for me to ignore that, right? And there's no way for decision makers to ignore that. But they won't know that. They won't know that unless they really devote their attention to understanding what is happening around them. Spending a lot of time developing strategic plans for activities over the next 5 years misses the point in a world in which we are operating at an ever increasing pace of societal transformation.
Absolutely. And Laura says, totally agree. And I am going to pause us for a second because, my friends, it is sponsorship time. It is time to take a quick break from questions to mention Association Chat's new and first ever silver sponsor, Fantiva. Fantiva aims to develop flexible, easy-to-use software tools that help transform your business. They have even created Member Nation that makes managing and growing your organization easier than ever before. Are you a part of Member Nation yet? Well, you should be. Connect with Fantiva on Twitter at Fantiva Inc. and tell them your friends at Association Chat sent you. I have to say, guys, I loved. I'm getting. This is the second time I've done the sponsorship bit, and I have to say, I love these guys for taking a chance with Association Chat, and having spoken with them before and had a few conversations. They're really fun guys, and I do hope that you show them some love in response for them showing Association Chat some love. So thank you, Fontiva, and now let's get back to more questions. All right, so talking about the director experience, you're saying that foresight is the key to designing a new director experience. Can we go into, how that works? Like,
Sure.
Why and how?
Sure. So a few times, and let me just also echo your thanks to Fontiva as well. And I hope Fontiva will follow me on Twitter at Duty of Foresight. So I just want to put that out there. So throughout our conversation, I've been talking about this issue of attention, right? Mm-hmm. And I've really been focusing a lot of my attention on this issue of attention as a finite and precious resource, right? So if you think about this in a very specific way, our directors in our organizations, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, right? Who do we put on boards, right? Mm-hmm. The people we put on boards, generally speaking, are not abject failures in life, right?
Right.
The people who serve on boards are people who are capable, who are talented, who are successful. They're popular, right? They bring something to the table, right? That's why you're putting them on the board, right? So because of who they are, all of us today, you, KiKi, myself, everyone who's watching and listening to this, everyone who will watch the video, everyone in the association world, all of us live in a world not only of societal transformation, but in a world of maximum distraction, right? So earlier I talked about mobile first as sort of an inspirational notion for foresight first, but I also have to acknowledge the flip side of that, which is that mobile is one of the driving forces of our societal distraction, right? Mm-hmm. We're spending so much time looking at our phones that we are fragmenting our attention away from things that are very important to us, right? Everyone's saying, "Oh, I'm so busy," and yet everywhere I go, and I'm just as guilty of this as anybody else. So I'm not projecting. I'm saying I'm also guilty of this. Everywhere I go, when I travel, on airplanes, in airports, in coffee shops, in meeting rooms, I see people looking at their phones.
Right.
So we're experiencing societal transformation, which is profound, and we are experiencing maximum distraction. So we've got already distracted people coming to our board meetings who are probably even more distracted because they are so capable and talented and smart and wonderful. And so they get asked to do a lot of things, right? And so their distraction level is probably even higher, right? Their attention is so fragmented, right? So, and then what do? We ask them to devote this little sliver of attention to things that really are not that important, right? Things that could be handled differently, right? So the way to address this is to honor the attention that they are devoting, right? To earn more of their attention by giving them something really significant to work on. And there's nothing more significant today than the work of foresight, right? Designing our approach to governing around the work of foresight is a crucial way of addressing this attention gap that exists. And, for me, I've consistently believed throughout my consulting career and throughout my association career that governing is a design opportunity for us, right? There are certain constraints that we face, right? There are constraints that state governments put on organizations. There are constraints that that federal government. See, your dog agrees.
I know, Gucci totally agrees.
And there are constraints we have to work within, but those constraints can be a source of inspiration for how do you design you're governing in a new and different way, right? So we have to work within those constraints. But then the other thing we have to look at is how do we make the work of governing a form of deep work, right? Instead of it being this kind of shallow work that really doesn't capture the attention of our directors, of our stakeholders, then we have to transform it into this deep work. And the way to get to deep work is to give people something really interesting and deep for them to focus their attention on, and the work of foresight and learning with the future and the entire cycle that you go through of sense making, meaning making, and decision making. That's the deep work that we need our boards to do, because as I said before, they're really the only ones who have the combination of attributes that enables that work to get done.
I'm giving my my colleague here, Gucci, a chance to get her barks out. But anyway, you know, I don't know. I think that so how, you know, how do we then, I get the feeling that if we looked at where associations could start, that you would say, okay, like, let's look at whatever it is that you think is going to be your agenda, and let's start by taking out, like, let's X through the stuff that does not need to be done by this group of people. Like, let's go through and really look at it as a focused, intentional practice where we are having them devote their attention and their time to the things that are the most critical for this organization, that this group of people, this specific group of people, can provide.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to approach it. And I think that's one option that I think associations have. Let me talk about that one in a second, and let me talk to another one first. I think, you know, in the same way that any organization tries to map out the experience that it offers to its stakeholders, they can do the same thing with directors, right? So in a lot of organizations, they're mapping out a customer experience, right? What happens at first contact with the customer? And if they come to our website, or if they come to our mobile site, or if they call the office, right? What happens with that customer, with that stakeholder, with that member? What do they see, you know, when they click through on this and that kind of thing? So we have already started to learn how to visualize or understand, map out the steps in the process that stakeholders have when they're having these experiences, right? And that same approach can apply to directors, right? So what happens once, like just today, in my email, I got, again, I will not name the organization, I'll just simply say that in my email, I received notification that nominations for the board of directors are now open, right? Okay. So that's part of the director experience, right? You've got to ask the question, okay, who are you targeting with that, right? And how are you messaging that kind of an email to people, right? And in some ways, we talk about the process of getting people on boards as board selection. That's usually the phrase that we use, right? Even if it ultimately culminates in an election process, we're still use the term board selection. I think we have to start using the term board invitation, right? That we have to start thinking about this, and there's a whole art form to the notion of how you invite people into things, right? And so I think we have to start getting serious about how do we go through the process of board invitation. So we are inviting people in to the work, right? Inviting them into the experience of being part of the board, even though they will have to go through some selection process on the back end. There are criteria, there may be an application, there'll be things to do. So we have to start from the very beginning of board invitation and then work our way through the steps, right? Through that selection process, through the ultimate choice, the orientation process. That's an area for a huge reworking of what we do. You know that I've joked about the way we talk about board orientation. It's more like, you know, freshman orientation, you know, a few hours of conversation followed by alcohol, you know, and that's not really what we need, right? That's a great, you know, there's social value, like there's social lubrication, I guess you could say, in having people get together in a reception, but we really need to rethink orientation. So each of the steps that we're already doing have to be rethought from the framework of how do we provide that experience that gets people to where we need them to be when the time comes that we are now asking them to do this work, and how do we prepare them to be effective at doing this work rather than assuming that they know what to do, which is an
Right.
assumption that a lot of organizations make too.
Well, it is. And I think that, so I'm imagining, okay, I'm an association executive, I'm the executive director, and I am listening to you, nodding my head, saying, absolutely, absolutely. But oh my gosh, this sounds huge. And I don't even know where to begin. And Amanda made a comment over here. You're absolutely onto something, Jeff. I love the idea of redirecting the board's resources on the future. I suspect that some will think about this as a radical shift. Given this change, who do you expect will get the ball rolling? Who introduces this idea to the board? Will it be forward-thinking CEOs? And that's kind of where I was headed too, which is, all right, there's an awful lot that, to think about in what you just said. And for someone who wants to take action and wants to get the ball rolling, who starts it? Where do we begin?
Well, I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that it has to start. That CEOs have to be wanting to go in this direction. I certainly think we have to, also encourage board chairs to take this responsibility, and really all officers, not just the chairs, but the people who will be going through, who will eventually become chairs. They're serving other offices on their way to becoming chair. So I think we have to look at all those people, but I think we have to look at boards themselves as well. Like, we have to not just limit our thinking to the CEOs who are working with boards, but also how can we look toward boards themselves as being catalysts, for this. I mean, I think another aspect of this that, I suppose that for some people, what I'm suggesting is a radical shift. Okay, that's fine. I would argue that it's a necessary shift in an environment where the nature of the challenges that our organizations have to confront demands more proactive steps, right? And so one of those proactive steps that I would also encourage as part of this is that, and this runs counter to decades of thinking and authorship and thought leadership on governing, and even my own writings on this topic. I'm sort of contradicting myself, but it's a realization that I've come to as part of this work. As I focus my attention on strategy as a process of learning, as opposed to an exercise in planning. And the necessity of that strategy as a process of learning is such that, because we operate in a time of great dynamism, great uncertainty, great volatility, that we can't really effectively plan in the way that we have traditionally. We have to sort of learn our way into the future. We have to learn with the future, learn with our stakeholders. Well, my strong feeling is that, that we really have to ask, and this is not actually all that new, because I kind of wrote about this in my ebook, back in 2012, Associations Unorthodox. We really have to get to a place where we are shifting responsibility for the work of strategy away from the board and into the hands of the stakeholders who are going to be most affected by that strategy. And I think that's a really important decision for us to make, because every association that I talk to is telling me we're trying to figure out how to build relationships with the next demographic cohort. I won't frame things up in generational terms, because I think those terms have become too diluted. So I'll just simply say that there's a demographic cohort or two that associations are trying to attract, right? They're still trying to figure out how to get to people, let's say, under the age of 35. And then there's another demographic cohort coming behind them. So how do they reach out to those people? Well, in my view, the best way to build a relationship with those stakeholders is to go out to them and say, we want you to help to set the strategy of this organization, right? Because they're the ones who are going to be most affected by that strategy. They're the ones who are going to be the beneficiaries of that strategy. Boards, for as much as I think boards have a very important work to do, and we've been discussing it, boards are so far removed in their experience with the association from those realities that they are really no longer the right people to be setting strategy for organizations. Now, it doesn't mean that their oversight responsibilities go away. It doesn't mean they aren't involved in the process. It doesn't mean they don't make decisions on behalf of the organization. But strategy making, strategy as learning, really needs to reside with the people who are going to be most affected by the strategy, and that's the stakeholders who are really the future of the organization. And their work on strategy, by the way, helps set us up for their future service on the board, right? Helps us build a pipeline of people who can serve in governing capacities, because they will be better prepared to serve in those roles later than we are doing now. We're not really preparing them either for any kind of service. And so this is what I mean by doing differently, not doing more, right? If we take the burden of strategy off of boards, the primary burden, and put it elsewhere, and enable them to focus their energies on foresight and use technology and other resources to manage other things, now all of a sudden the burden of serving on the board is manageable, right? And the attention is something you can devote more of your attention, because you don't have to deal with 1,000 different activities.
So the wheels are really turning on this. And, I mean, I think that one of the great things about being connected to so many really smart people in this community is that, I mean, some of what you were saying like made me think about the work that other people are doing. Amanda, who's on here, great blog. She just wrote this great blog post about a lot of times people don't even know exactly why they're in the association in the first place, but because the people that they follow, because the people that they maybe aspire to be, or put a lot of like the influencers, because they belong and find value in it, they're joining and belonging to the organization. And I guess then, we're really hoping on the association side that they then come to find out that, yes, it does have merit and it has value, and providing that, providing that opportunity once they're in. But, I was having this sort of internal split-second fantasy about having you guys talking about this topic and how, some of the research she's done and the work that you're doing could play into how associations prepare better and plan better and market better in the future. So yeah, I mean, absolutely stellar stuff. So I guess, Jeff, I asked you about some of the next steps that associations could take, or even the first step that an association executive could take in getting started. Where can people learn more about this? I mean, we're almost at the end of our time, so I want to make sure that we get in some of the resources where people can find out more information.
Sure. Just before I answer that, I promised that I would respond to something that you said earlier about a way to approach this, and I want to do that just briefly. So what I said was I talked about mapping out the director experience. You, I think, suggested a really great idea, which is looking at, taking an agenda from even not just one agenda, right? Because one agenda might be an aberration. So take the last 12 months of board agendas, and with a very, very critical eye, ask the question: are there ways that we could handle this differently? Right? Are there ways that we could take some of this burden off the board? Can we use technology? Can we do it in the white space in between meetings, right? How much of the time, attention, and energy, which is an issue we haven't even touched on today, because it's not just it's time is the issue everyone talks about. We've talked the time question to death in our society, right? We're starting to talk more about the attention issue. What we haven't yet really fully comprehended is it's also an energy issue. It's a physical energy issue. Okay. It's a psychic energy issue. We have to deal with that question as well. But that'll be another association chat we'll do in the future. So just literally taking those 12 months of agendas and carving them down and saying, how much of the board's attention can we recapture by not having them do things that represent forms of shallow work, right? And encouraging them and challenging them to do the deep work of foresight that is necessary, not just to the survival of the organization. I don't like to frame things up in that way, but to the thrivability of the organization. We want to build organizations that are capable of thriving, and that demands learning with the future, which is what you do through the work of foresight. So in terms of how people can learn more about this, there are certainly some resources on this, and there'll be more resources coming on my website, which I appreciate you showing earlier. It's foresightfirst.io. And so there are resources there now, articles that I've written, and there'll be more content coming onto that site over the course of the next couple of months. So that's one thing that I can recommend right away. I also have my Twitter account, which is @DutyOfForesight, where I'll be posting content. I'll be doing micro podcasts that I call Foresight First 120, which are literally 2-minute audio, micro podcasts. Where I'll be talking about these issues. So there's really no time investment to listen to them. They're so short, right? And they're very easy to listen to. You can listen to them inline on Twitter or via the Anchor app. That's also an option. And then in a couple of months, as we get into the spring, I will be launching a new service called Foresight as a Service, which will be essentially a subscription-based service for association boards and their staff partners to help them sort of feed into their foresight work by providing them with information, insights, analysis, synthesis, and my perspectives to help guide them through looking at the right issues, addressing the right issues, helping them build their board capacity, and that sort of thing. And that'll be a subscription service, and that I think will launch sometime in the spring. So there'll be a variety of ways that people will be able to access things. Some things now, and then some things are coming.
All right. Thank you so much. And I can't, you and I, we could talk forever, but this has been truly valuable to me personally. And I know that there are several things that you mentioned that I'm going to go back and dig into a little bit more. For all of you who are on, and yes, some of you who made just short little comments agreeing, and Lauren saying that you're here. Thank you for participating. That's all the time we have for Association Chat today. So thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing with all of us and giving some great insights as well. And now, this is what we're getting ready to have on upcoming association chats in the next couple of weeks. Next week, it will be Valentine's Day, and yours truly will be celebrating with her Valentine in Jamaica. However, I will be on for association chat, Wi-Fi willing. So it's all about feeling the love, why review sites should be a part of your association strategy. We're going to be talking with Terry Carden, and that should be fun. I'm not going to promise you babes in bikinis, but there may be a frosty drink involved. So I hope that you guys can tune in. Usual time, usual place. The week following that, we're going to be talking about quantifying your member value, the do's and don'ts of marketing, with Gary Palmatier. And Gary was with Association Chat. There are sort of classes that come through, groups of people who are regulars, and he was part of an earlier class of Association Chat back in the Tweet Chat days. And he's going to be on talking with us about quantifying your member value. So I'm really excited about that. I hope you've all gained some new insight that will help you all either today or later on, whenever that may be. If you're loving Association Chat, please consider sharing this chat with your colleagues and give us some love on social media. And as always, if you want to continue the discussion, you can join the Association Chat Facebook group for regular updates on upcoming topics and special guests. Cheers to the second month of 2017. Here's hoping that you're still attacking those New Year's resolutions and giving your boards some foresight. I hope you all have a great week. Thanks, everyone.
Something that's always bothered me my entire life has been when I walk in and see decorative candles that are unlit, furniture that is encased in plastic, things that should be used that are not being used. This applies to information too. I am a speaker because I have something important to share with people, and that's the information that I work in every day. When I went into learning about other components of digital marketing, that's when everything lit up. I suddenly realized how I could help people. The thing that's really exciting is that the more that I speak to different types of organizations, the more I see that a lot of us are all struggling with the same things. And whether it's as a consultant, or whether it's as a keynote speaker, or whether it's as a session breakout speaker, or I'm delivering a workshop, or training, or facilitating a panel, I can say, okay, well, here's what people are looking for. Here's how they're finding you now. Here's how they could be finding you. And here's how you can take your message and meet them where they are. So when somebody leaves the room, I want them to say, I got something out of that, and more than that, that's something that's going to positively impact my life. That's what I'm all about.